Welcome to another episode of the Victory Podcast, driven by Audi. I'm your host, Keely, Eure, joined by my co-host and former USC quarterback, Cody Kessler. Cody, the Trojans are looking to go 1-0 this week as they head to Maryland, still in search of their first Big Ten road win.
Yeah, this is a big week for multiple reasons. Most importantly, we have to go out there and get our first road win in Big Ten conference play. We have to be able to get over that hurdle. We also need to show that this team is making the improvements that need to be made and taking that next step forward. I know the 3-3 record is frustrating, and at the end of the day, the most important thing is winning football games. I understand that, but your record doesn't always tell the entire story. I thought we did a lot of things at a high level for the majority of the game last week against a number 4 team in the country. We absolutely cannot take a step backwards this week. We have to build off of that and continue our momentum going forward. We have to be able to put it all together and find a way to finish this week against Maryland.
Well, I'm excited to dive into it with you, Cody. Before we do, just a couple of reminders. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Also, if you ever want to get your voice heard, be sure to look out for a tweet or a question box, either on Twitter or Instagram. Our socials are VictoryPodUSC. Also, if you're listening to the audio version of this show, you can go to the description of the episode and it says send us a text. And that's a way you can get a hold of us when there's not a question box or a tweet. Now, Cody, I know we normally dive into these episodes starting with the head coach, but we actually have some news to get to first. It was kind of a devastating day for USC's defense from a depth perspective. Back-to-back bad news for USC's key contributors. First up, head coach Lincoln Riley announced that Anthony Lucas is now out for the season. He had a procedure done on Tuesday morning. He, I believe, first initially got hurt against Minnesota and then played against Penn State, but apparently they had to shut him down for the season. So that is just unfortunate news for him. But Riley did say that he is in good spirits and they're happy to build on what he did so far this season and bring it into his next season in 2025. And then later that night on Tuesday, Eric Gentry announced that he will be redshirting this year. I know that was set as a possibility, and he decided that after suffering multiple concussions at the start of the season, which unfortunate news, obviously, but I am proud that, in college football, sometimes it's hard to be the one to go, you know what, I need to take a step back and take care of myself first. But when it comes to the brain, you just don't mess around with that, Cody.
Yeah, I mean, you're always taught to be tough, right? And, I played an era, too, where you tried to hide it, right? You didn't want to show that you were shaking your head, or you didn't want to show that you had concussion symptoms because you wanted to be out there and you wanted to play. But no, I'm proud of Eric for doing that. That's very important for his longevity of his career as well. Anthony Lucas, another guy that's going to be missed. But, obviously I'm excited for him to hit rehab hard this offseason, get back healthy, and be ready for 2025. And I know we got some questions at the end, but it's next man up mentality. There's going to be some young players that are going to get thrown into the fire. They're going to have to find a way to go out there and dominate, make some plays on Saturday, and then continue that going forward. But, yeah, tough loss for the Trojans. Just hate to see 2 guys like that are out for the rest of the season. Yeah,
and as you said, Cody, we have questions about it. So we'll get more into depth issues and how do they replace both Gentry and Lucas later in the show. But as I mentioned, I know you like to start with this preview with the head coaches, so take it away.
I actually am starting somewhere else today because we had a little, not history lesson, what would you call this, a reptile lesson in the Kessler household yesterday. Okay. So I was going to quiz you. For those of you who don't know, I send Keely my notes, and I wasn't going to send this on the notes, but I messed up. So I'll quiz everybody at home, but Keely can play along and pretend like she hasn't heard it. Sure. Wink, wink. So we play the Maryland Terrapins this week, right?
Correct.
Do you know now, but did you know, let's be honest, did you know what a Terrapin was before this?
I knew that they were a turtle in the turtle family.
Okay, see, I had no idea. So I'm sitting there doing my prep yesterday, watching film. My wife's sitting on the couch. She asked what their mascot was. I said the Terrapin, but they call them the Terps. She asked me what a Terrapin was. I said, I have no idea. Can you please look it up? She said the same thing. I think it's a turtle, but I'll check it out. So what they are, though, and this is our little lesson of the week, a little fun fact before we get into the coaching staff.
With Cody.
It is called a diamondback terrapin, which is a turtle. It is the state reptile of Maryland.
Wow.
And according to my wife, and this is quoted by her, that they are unique because they are both a land turtle and, again, I quote, a swimmy one is what she said, SWIMMY, a swimmy turtle. So it's not quite a sea turtle. It's not quite a land turtle. It is a combination of both. Sounded like we had David Attenborough in our house yesterday. My wife, the Terrapin is a turtle of not only the land, but is also a swimmy one that is found in Maryland.
This is incredible. I didn't know I was getting an impression.
That's what I thought of. That was a joke I made to her. But yes, so there's your lesson on the week of what a Terrapin is, but that is Maryland's mascot.
I love it.
Now, great transition jumping into their coaching staff.
Please
their head
do.
Coach.
I'm still recovering from that amazing impression.
I've got to say, though, David Attenborough is a GOAT, too. Have you ever watched Our Planet when he does those breakdowns?
I've heard
of
his
voice. I butchered his voice.
I've never watched what the program he does. I'm sorry.
He's a GOAT. Him and Steve Irwin are the GOATs when it comes to reptiles, animals. But anyways, okay, back on track, talking football here.
Football, yes.
Head coach is Michael Locksley. sixth season as Maryland's head coach. Has an overall head coaching record of 34 wins and 62 losses. He has 32-36 at Maryland. This year, he has the Terps off to a 3-3 start. Their wins are over UConn, Virginia, and Villanova. Their losses are against Michigan State, Indiana, and then last week they lost to Northwestern 37-10. This is his third time back at Maryland and his 16th season overall.
Wow, okay.
He was their running back coach from 1998 to 2002. Then he came back to be their offensive coordinator and QB coach from 2012 to 2015. And he also took over as an interim head coach in 2015. And then obviously in 2018, he took over as their head coach, and he still has that title to this day. Locksley is an offensive-minded coach, but he actually played defensive back in college.
Interesting.
So I've talked about defensive coach or offensive players that go play or that go coach on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah.
Locksley's the opposite. And that's going to be a trend. I'll tell you in a second here why that happens on his staff as well. But he started out as a defensive back in college, coached defense for the first couple of years of his career, and then he took over as an offensive-minded coach after that. Locksley does know what it takes to win, though. Before coming back to Maryland, he was the co-offensive coordinator at Alabama in 2017 when they won the national championship.
Wow, okay.
And then he took over as full-time offensive coordinator in 2018 when they made it back to the national championship game but came up just short against Clemson. Locksley was the winner of the Broyles Award in 2018, which is given to the nation's top assistant coach. That is what I think kind of jumpstart him to get some of these head coaching opportunities, and then landed at Maryland. The Terps have posted winning seasons in each of the last 3 years under Locksley and have also won 3 consecutive bowl games these last 3 years, which is the first time in school history. Wow. We cannot take them lightly. This is a coach and a team that knows how to win football games.
Similarly, it's kind of the argument we make for this USC team. The record doesn't really reflect everything.
Yeah, and that's what, and when you watch film, like I do, and we'll get into it with the offense and defense, when you watch film do these breakdowns, you see, and I know Coach Riley talks about it here and other coaches do too, but you see those couple plays a game that they missed, that they could be, have a better record. One of those, Michigan State, they lost by 3, right? That was a close game. And then they played Indiana where it was very tight until the very end, and they made some mistakes, right? It could have gone either way. Northwestern came out, had a great plan, and played very good against them. So that was a game that was out of reach. But like you said, they could easily be 5-1 right now, right? So the record doesn't always tell the entire story. They have a very good coaching staff, and keeping up with that, I'm going to go to the offensive side of the ball. Their offensive coordinator, I'm sure a lot of fans or college football fans recognize this name, Josh Gaddis. This is his second season as Maryland's offensive coordinator, an experienced coach that has been a part of some very good football teams and some very good offenses in his career. Before coming to Maryland, Gaddis was the co-offensive coordinator at Alabama, alongside Locksley, their head coach in 2018, so they had some time there together. That was a big reason why Locksley went out and got Gaddis to come to Alabama. He was the offensive coordinator at Michigan from 2019 to 2021, where he also won the Broyles Award for the nation's top assistant in 2021. He was in the offensive coordinator at Miami for one season. That was a year that he struggled a little bit. Miami's production went down, and that was part of the reason why he was let go. But then Locksley goes out and says, hey, come over here with Maryland. Let's call the offense like we did at Alabama. So that's where we are at now. Gaddis joined Maryland in 2023. Another coach that knows how to win, that knows how to develop players. He has coached multiple All-Americans and multiple All-Conference players, and he's been a part of 4 conference championship winning teams, and he's coached in multiple college football playoff games. Interesting enough, though, Gaddis, just like Locksley, also played defensive back in college, and now he's an offensive-minded coach. That's why I think they work so well together. They had a lot of success together when Locksley was the offensive coordinator and Gaddis was co-OC in Alabama. Yeah. In Gaddis' first year at Maryland last season, the Terps finished 4th in the Big Ten in scoring offense, averaging 30 points per game. They're right around that same number this year. He also had 8 offensive players earn Big Ten honors, 5 of which were either first, second, or third team, which is the most in Maryland history since joining the Big Ten Conference. Their offense is off to a solid start again this year, and they have one of, in my opinion, the most dangerous passing attacks in all of college football. Some very good players on the perimeter. Wow. Now, another coach that you may recognize, and Gaddis is the offensive coordinator, but they do have a co-OC, an associate head coach, is Kevin Sumlin, who is a big name in college football. Yeah. This is his second season at Maryland. Most notably, he was the head coach at Texas A&M from 2012 to 2017, when he had some very explosive offenses, the Johnny Manziels, the Mike Evans, right, when he had those big-time playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. He also coached at Arizona from 2018 to 2019. Now, Gaddis does call the plays, but I thought it's worth mentioning that he does have input from another very experienced coach in Kevin Sumlin when it comes to offensive game planning. Now, moving over to the defensive side of the ball, their defensive coordinator is Brian Williams. 6th season at Maryland. He came over with Locksley when he was first hired back in 2019. He kind of climbed the ladder to earn this job as their DC. He was a linebacker coach that first year. Then he coached defensive line in 2020, was co-defensive coordinator in 2021, and then he was promoted to defensive coordinator in 2022, and he's had that title ever since. So not a ton of experience calling defenses. This will only be his third year ever as a defensive coordinator. He has had some success, though, the last couple of years at Maryland. Last year, Maryland only allowed 22 points per game, which was the fewest since 2010 in school history. Williams also produced 6 All-Big Ten defenders a year ago, which was the most since 2014 for Maryland. Over the last few seasons, Williams has had this Maryland defense headed in the right direction, and they are doing so again this year in multiple areas. The Terps are 7th in the entire country in takeaways, and they have also been very good at stopping the run so far this year.
Interesting. Now, overall, I feel like maybe I'm recency biased, but I feel like there's a lot of like co-coordinators this season compared to other seasons when we previewed.
Yeah, and it's funny too because for me, when it's an offensive coordinator, then a co-offensive coordinator, it's easier to know, okay, who's calling the plays.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the co-OC has that title for a reason, and titles are everything in college football.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you Kevin Sumlin has heavy input on those game planning weeks. I guarantee you Coach Henson has heavy input when talking to Coach Riley, especially being an offensive line coach. Eric Henderson has a lot of input when it comes to Dan Lynn, calling defense or preparing for the week. But at the end of the day, it's tough for me when it's a co-OC and a co-OC, right? And Minnesota had that.
Yeah.
And then you try to figure out who's calling plays, and then PJ Fleck kind of kept it a secret throughout spring, and you didn't really know.
Odd, yeah.
Now, is that an advantage? Who really knows? You're right. You watch the film anyways, but at the end of the day, I've been a part of teams in the NFL. When I was with Cleveland, our head coach would call a lot of plays. Then our offensive coordinator would sometimes take over in the second half, or they would flip-flop games to calling plays, which was difficult at times, but then you start to understand which coach is going to call a certain play which way, but they're always on the same page when it came to game planning, and that's kind of the story of college football. Yes, titles matter, but obviously there's a lot of good input when you have co-OCs or co-DCs when it comes to game planning week in and week out.
Okay, well, let's take a deeper dive at this Maryland offense. We're now 6 games into the season, so what are you seeing from them statistically?
Yeah, I'm going to start with scoring offense, and like I just mentioned in the coach's preview, they were 4th in Big Ten play a year ago, averaging 30 points per game. It's the same story in 2024. They have 30 points per game, which is 62nd in all of college football. Total offense, they're averaging 435 yards per game, which is 43rd in college football. Now, passing offense, this is where they excel. They're one of the few teams in the country that are averaging over 300 yards per game. They're averaging 303 yards per game, which is 13th in all of college football. They have some very good playmakers, and we'll get into that in a second when we get to the key players, and their quarterback is playing at a high level right now. Rushing offense, this is where they fall off a little bit. They struggle to be balanced. They're averaging 132 yards per game, which is 93rd in college football, and when it comes to third down, they have been decent and above average, in my opinion, where you want to be as an offense. They have a 46% conversion rate on third down.
Well, I'm going to wager to guess that their quarterback is one of their key players, Cody, so take it away.
Yeah, quarterback Billy Edwards Jr. is my first red dot player of the week, and for those of you who don't know, a red dot player is a player that can hurt you if you don't game plan for them. You have to know where they're at and what they're doing at all times on the field. He is a 6'4", 220-pound junior, has a 68% completion percentage, 1,700 yards. He's averaging 7.6 yards per completion, 11 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. He also has 3 rushing touchdowns. Now, similar to Eure a week ago, I'm not going to put him as a dual threat, but they do have some quarterback design runs. They like to let him run. He's a big body player. He can run you over. He can run around you. He does some things well in the run game. He's not going to look to be a run-first player, so he's going to want to sit in the pocket and throw the football, but we have to be ready, especially when the play breaks down, for Billy Edwards to take off and run. Their running back, though, when they do run the football, is my second red dot player of the week, a very good back, and Roman Hemby. He's a 6', 208-pound junior, 74 carries, 360 yards, 5 yards per gain, 3 touchdowns on the year. He also has 16 receptions, 92 yards, and 1 touchdown. He has 2,800 total yards in his career and 24 touchdowns. A very experienced player, playing at a high level this year, both on the ground and through the air, so we have to be ready for that as well. Their other running back that they'll give the football to is Nolan Ray. He's a 5'11", 205-pound freshman, 39 carries, 185 yards, 4.7 average, and he has 2 touchdowns on the ground. Now, this player here, and he has his own section when we get to their breakdown because it's that important, but my next red dot player and their best player on offense by far is wide receiver Ty Felton. He's 6'2", 180-pound senior. He has 55 receptions, 719 yards. He's averaging 13 yards per catch and 5 touchdowns. That's 719 yards in 6 games. That is some players' entire year stats, right? That's a very solid 1, maybe even a 2 when it comes to a depth chart players' stats for the year. He is playing some high-level football. 55 receptions. He's on pace to be above 100. He's on pace to break 1,400 yards this year. He is playing at a high level. My next red dot player is their other receiver, Caden Prather, a very good 1-2 punch, right? If you're taking Felton out of the game, they're going to go find Prather, and he's a big-time playmaker on the outside. 6'3", 210-pound senior, 34 receptions, 350 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Now, a couple other guys to pay attention to in the pass game. Wide receiver Octavian Smith Jr., 5'11", 175-pound junior, 10 receptions, 108 yards. And then their 2 tight ends are Dylan Wade, who's a 6'2", 225-pound sophomore, 13 receptions, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then Preston Howard has 11 receptions and 106 yards through the air.
Now, how would you describe their scheme? Does it lend itself to be successful through the air, or do their playmakers make them successful in the passing game?
Yeah, this is a spread offense that does have some pro-style tendencies, especially in the run game. They will use some 2 tight end looks and get under center. That's when they want to run the football. When they do go spread, though, they like to spread your defense out, right? They will give you some 4 wide receiver looks, or they will detach the tight end. What I mean by that is instead of the tight end lining up at the end of the line of scrimmage or being connected to the tackle, they'll move him out like a Zachariah Branch, right? Like a F receiver in the slot. They like to go 4 wides. They like to go stack looks too and go even more extended in their splits because they create a 5-man box in the run game. If they do run it, they also allow their running back to be effective in the pass game so he can get some of those one-on-one matchups. They want to throw the football around. That is their identity. That's what they love to do. Like I said, over 300 yards per game. And I wouldn't quite call it an air raid attack because when you break it down, they are 54% pass and 46% run. So it's pretty balanced. Now, again, it's frustrating when you do that because sacks count towards the run percentage.
And I hate that.
So you can't, necessarily add that in consistent because it is going to be a pass play, but now he gets sacked, so now it counts as a run play. So it's tough when it comes to breaking that down. But they are, like I said, very good at throwing the football. 7.6 yards per attempt, which is 61st in the country. So not a ton of shots like we saw a week ago against Penn State, who's averaging over 10 yards per attempt and consistently push the football down the field. Now, they do have some explosive players. They can go make some plays down the field, but they like to be more consistent, get the football in their playmakers' hands, and then let them do the rest.
Now, you mentioned their quarterback is playing at a high level right now. What are you seeing from him specifically?
Yeah, Billy Edwards Jr. is playing some very good football right now. He's coming off of his worst game of the year statistically, though, last week against Northwestern. But before that, he has been playing some very high-level football. He has multiple touchdown passes in 5 of their first 6 games this year, including 3 against Indiana. When you watch the film, you can tell he does a very good job of reading defenses, of knowing where to go with the football, of not putting the football in harm's way too many times, only 3 interceptions on the year, so he protects the football. He does a good job of going through progression, right? He understands this offense. He understands going through his read when he has the time from his offensive line, does a good job of breaking, or when the play breaks down, he gets outside of the pocket, makes some throws on the run. He trusts his arm a lot, though, and what I mean by that is he is a great seam thrower of the football. He does a good job of putting it over the linebackers, but before the safeties, he can make those, far hash to the opposite sideline throws. That's when he does get in trouble sometimes, though. He'll force some of these throws that maybe aren't there. He'll try to fit a throw into a window to where the defense is kind of crashing on because, again, he has a strong arm. He does have a good arm. He like I said, he can throw the seam throw very well. He can push the football down the field at a high level, in my opinion. I think he's a very good quarterback, but that's where he gets in trouble. And he doesn't give you a lot of opportunities, but that's where we can take advantage of him. Think of last week when Allard tried to fit it in to their tight end, Kamari, knocked it up in the air, and then Easton Mascarenas-Arnold makes the play on the football instead of going elsewhere, right? He trusts his arm to make some of those throws. Like I said, a strong arm, very good seam thrower, does a good job of anticipation when it comes to those throws. He knows when to throw it before the receiver breaks, or he knows if he's going to the second window, he'll throw it while his receiver's still in the first and right off of the ear hole of a linebacker just before safety, so he does a good job of that. It's going to be a great challenge this week for our defensive backs, especially giving up 400 yards a week ago from Penn State, so I want to see him be able to turn the page, take that next step against a very good passing attack that Maryland has, led by Edwards Jr.
Well, you identified Felton as his main target. What makes him so good as a wide receiver?
Yeah, Ty Felton, in my opinion, is one of the best receivers in college football right now. He's 4th in the entire country and 1st in the Big Ten with 719 receiving yards. He is 4th in the country and 1st in the Big Ten in receiving yards per game with 120 yards per game, which can be game-changing, right? We have to be able to game plan for that. He is 3rd in all of college football and 1st in the Big Ten with 55 receptions. Now, we have to have a great plan in place for Felton, and my biggest reason for that is this cannot be another game or another week where one player dictates the outcome, right? Last week against Tyler Warren, a week before that against Darius Taylor at Minnesota, right? He led the team in rushing yards and receiving. Going back even further, the Dalton Kincaid games, right? Some of those games to where it feels like as a USC defense, one player really takes over and dictates the outcome because we can't take them out of the game plan. We have to be able to do that. Now, that's a lot easier said than done. When you look at Felton's tape, he is a very good player. They will line him up in a lot of different spots. Not as much as Warren. He's not going to play center. He's not going to play offensive guard. He's not going to play quarterback, but they like to put him outside. Then they'll put him in the slot. Then they'll bring him in fly motion. Then they'll use fly motion and give a little toss pass to him. Then they'll hand the football off on an end around. So they'll use him in a lot of different ways to get him the football. Think Zachariah Branch a little bit.
Okay.
How we use him in some of those screen plays and those end arounds. He is a great athlete and very dangerous with the football in his hand. He's a very good route runner and understands coverage. He knows how to find holes in your defense. And offensive coordinator Josh Gaddis had talked about, and the receivers backed this up, of giving those receivers a little bit of leeway when it comes to breaking off a route, right? When we talked, remember the Deuce Robinson when he caught the corner stop against Michigan, right?
Yeah.
They talked about throughout the week. You can run a corner if there's a defender outside, shut it down, and you and Miller have to be on the same page. Same thing with Edwards Jr. in his receiving core. They're allowed to cut off routes. They're allowed to, if I'm running a go ball, I can't get on top, to shut it down. They're allowed to, work into a window that maybe isn't is drawn on the paper or shown when you're going over the game plan. They do a good job of being on the same page, right? And you have to have some experience to be able to do that. Felton is one of the best, in my opinion, of sitting in the window, finding the hole, being able to get open and use leverage to his advantage. They want to get him the football in the passing game. Now, when they don't, they also have a great 1-2 punch with the other wide receiver, Caden Prather, as well.
Well, in that sense, how do you go about coverage on the back end if they have two threats like that?
Yeah, I mean, key priority has to be Felton in this football game, right? He's a big-time playmaker. Like I said, he's top 5 in pretty much every category in the entire country. He's leading the Big Ten right now in multiple categories as well. They do have another good receiver in Prather. He has 34 receptions, 350 yards, and 3 touchdowns. But priority one has to be, and I don't care this week if we maybe send someone in man with him the entire time, put more focus on Felton and taking him out of the game plan, and then Prather, and then if Prather starts hurting us a little bit more, then we can readjust. Then maybe go to a little bit more cloud on Prather. Then we can mix up some coverages. But to start this football game, we have to be ready for Felton in every aspect. If we play man, if we play zone, if it's man-to-man, pick someone to send around with him. Right? I think Jalen Smith's playing some very high-level football right now. I wouldn't mind sending Jalen around and playing man-to-man, whether he's on the right, whether he's on the left, whatever it may be. If we play zone, cloud him. Right? Put 2 defenders over him, have someone underneath, have someone over the top. Like I said, he does a good job of finding the zone, but we have to be able to take him out of the game plan because of what we've seen. Right now, if it's a Prather day and they're getting him the football and he becomes priority one, or they're throwing the football to Octavian Smith, their other wide receiver, or it becomes the Dylan Wade day where they're going to find their tight end because of what they saw against us a week ago, then you adjust. And Lynn is very good at halftime adjustments, and he's done a great job of putting guys in the right position. It's been hit or miss. I know last week we struggled having an answer for Tyler Warren. Now, again, they put him at so many different spots. Yeah. It's tough. And it's difficult when you have him at center, to trust your keys, but then know that he's going to go out on a pass route. And then you have him at quarterback. I get that stuff. I'm not making excuses, but I can only tell you from a defensive standpoint how difficult that is to game plan against. And as an offense, you're licking your chops because there were times we put a Dory Jackson in the backfield and you think they would just put everybody on him and say, Dory's in the backfield. Well, you have other guys around him, right? And then we get a one-on-one with a Mike linebacker that you say should never happen, but because of other responsibilities, now a Dory gets one-on-one with a Mike and he runs right by him for a touchdown against Notre Dame, right? Those things happen. And then going back to the LSU game, right? Kyron Lacey had that huge first half. It felt like he was going to go for 15 catches and 200 yards, had 0 in the second half because we did a great job with those adjustments. But for me, going into this game, whether it's man, whether it's zone, whatever our plan is, we have to key on Felton. We have to take him out of the game plan. He has to be priority one to start this football game. And then, like I said, if it becomes a Hemby day or a Prather day, we make those adjustments, but we can't let someone who already has this much production hurt us like we've seen players hurt us in the past.
Well, speaking of Hemby, I find it interesting that you made him a red dot player when you just explained how they're stronger through the air. What made him a red dot player?
Yeah, now, they are a pass-heavy offense, right? That's where they've excelled. But when they do run the football, Roman Hemby is who they want to get the ball to. And that's why I picked him as a red dot, because you never know. Going into this game plan, I mean, we played last week, and we thought we were going to have to throw the football over the field, and we couldn't run the ball. And then it became, the Woody Marks day, and Quentin Joyner had a couple plays. So, and when you look at his overall stats, right, he has 2,800 total yards in his career, 24 touchdowns. He's just someone that we have to account for on Saturday if they do start to run the football well, especially with some of our front 7 players out, right? We talked about Anthony Lucas. We talked about Eric Gentry being out. They may want to take advantage of that. Obviously had some rotation with some younger guys on the defensive line. Are they going to be ready to go out and, perform week to week? So that's something I think Gaddis, their offensive coordinator, will try to key on if they do want to run the football. And then this year, he's been productive. He has 74 carries. That's a lot of touches at the running back position, 360 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's also involved heavily in the pass game, right? He has 16 receptions for 92 yards and a touchdown. Now, when he does get the football, he is a solid back. He has great vision, great burst of speed. Go watch the Indiana game. You see him take one to the house. I think it's 30, 40 yards plus. Has great breakaway speed. He can take it the distance. He has great hands out of the backfield. And not a huge pre-snap motion team, but they like to move Hemby around a lot. Right?
Okay.
If it's not Felton, Hemby's moving. They'll start him out wide, and give you a man or zone tell, or give their offense a man or zone tell, then they'll motion him into the backfield. They do a thing over and over with him where he's starting in the backfield, gets a little side motion to create leverage with the Mike linebacker to get him on the edge right before the ball snap. I mean, it's a half second before the ball snaps. He'll start shuffling, and then getting out wide, they'll throw in the football in space. So there is a lot of their offense that runs through Himby. They do use some pistol formations too. Be ready for that this week, to where you don't know if the strength is right or left when it comes to the back, right, making your adjustments as a linebacker. They will get under center in the run game, but their other side of that is going to pistol, right, putting the back directly behind him and then giving him the option of going right or left. When they do run the football, though, like I mentioned, the pass-heavy team, be ready for RPOs. They're going to always have an RPO tag off of that. They're always going to have some play action, some screen plays off of that. And although they do use Himby in the run game, and he's my red dot player this week in the backfield, we have to be ready for Edwards Jr., right? I didn't say he was quite a dual threat quarterback, but they will use him in some of those zone reads. They do have some quarterback design runs. They've shown a couple draw plays on third and medium to where, he'll take one step, let everybody drop into coverage, and then take off. He's 6'4", 220 plus. He is a good runner, or a physical runner when he has the ball in his hands. Again, not a run first quarterback, but he has the ability to take off and hurt you on the ground. So yeah, Himby's my red dot player in the run game, but also be ready for Edwards Jr. and be ready for some of those RPOs in the run game as well.
Now that motion that you mentioned that Himby does, is that something you can key on?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that they obviously use to their advantage. Now, you don't want to overrun it.
Sure.
And then they cut back inside with an angle route, but majority of the time they do. And go watch the Villanova game. Go watch the Indiana game. They do it against Northwestern a couple times. He'll be lined up in the backfield and then start to slightly shuffle to get leverage, right? If you have a Mike linebacker that's in man-to-man on him, or even a Sam linebacker to the strength that's man on him, as soon as he starts shuffling, he wants to get that quick, leverage advantage so he can get a swing route. They'll throw a couple screen passes to him on third down out of it. They've not used it a ton, right? It's not like this is a staple in their offense, but when they do use it, they're doing it for a reason, right? And this week could be a window dressing type situation to where you've seen it enough on tape, those swing routes, sending them out and flaring them to the flat, that they get them the football quick. They may use it to displace a linebacker and throw an in route behind it, but majority of the time, they do it to create leverage, create an advantage, get him the football in space. And like I mentioned, he has great vision, but he also has a great burst of speed in space.
Now, they only put up 10 points in their loss to Northwestern. What led to that performance?
Yeah, there were a couple things that Northwestern did well defensively against Maryland in that football game. And like you said, held them to 10 points. They're averaging 30 a game. They did a great job of creating takeaways. That was the biggest thing when you watch that film. They had 4 turnovers on the day, 1 interception. They also had 3 fumbles. One of them was a sack fumble. That was a walk-in touchdown, so they created points off of that turnover. Another thing is they made them one-dimensional, right? And that's something that I think we need to be able to do on Saturday. Yes, we know they want to throw the football first. Yes, they want to throw the ball all over the field. They have 300 yards per game through the air. But when their run game is struggling and they have to depend on the pass, and we can cover well or get some pressure on Edwards Jr. like Northwestern did, they struggle. Like I mentioned, Edwards Jr. has multiple touchdown passes in 5 of their 6 games. The one game he didn't was against Northwestern. He had 0. He couldn't find really a rhythm through the air. Now, he threw for 300 yards. He had 28 completions, so it wasn't terrible, but they struggled to find that spark and get some points through the air. Northwestern also did not dominate this game on the offensive side of the ball. They just did what was necessary, and they still won by 27. Then they had 10 first downs. Northwestern did the entire football game, right?
Wow.
That they were 3 of 12 on third down. They also only had 283 yards for the entire game. So it was just a game to where they created turnovers. They did a good job of making them one-dimensional. Maryland only had 59 yards rushing on the day. They couldn't get the run game going. They couldn't get Billy Edwards Jr. going. But overall, something we need to start being a little better at, and it helped us last week against Penn State, and we saw flashes of those. Obviously, we've got to capitalize on the offensive side of the ball, but we saw flashes of those momentum shifts and how important they are in those sudden change moments. We've got to create turnovers this week. When they had 4, they struggled to put up points on the board, and Northwestern ran away with it.
Now, I know when we talked in our Sunday episode, you were a little bit concerned by the pass defense that USC had against Penn State. Is this going to be something where you're looking for that improvement, that next step from USC?
Yeah, I mean, I love the challenge, right? As a former player, as a competitor. Now, as a fan, you may be a little stressed and worried after giving up 400 yards. Now you go play one of the best passing offenses in all of college football. But as a player, you want to have that immediate test, right? You want to watch the film from a week ago. You want to learn from it. You want to make the corrections at practice and then go out on Saturday and apply that and show that you can turn the page and take that next step. So I think it's a great challenge, right? We're playing one of the best wide receivers in college football right now statistically, a very good quarterback that they can throw it all over the field, that has multiple games with multiple touchdown passes that can hurt you through the air. They are one-dimensional, right? They've struggled to get the ground game going, and where they've really excelled is through the air. So we have to be able to stop that. But again, we have to be ready for both. We played Minnesota. We thought they were going to throw the football over the field. They relied heavy on the run game. So you never really know what to expect. But when it comes to, a challenge or being able to make some immediate adjustments. I'm excited for this week, right? You give up 400 yards, now you go play a very good passing football team and show that you can, fix some of those mistakes from a week ago.
Alrighty, Cody, any other thoughts on Maryland's offense before we turn to the defense?
Yeah, a couple final notes for me. First one is they've already given up 13 sacks this year, so we have to be able to get pressure on Edwards Jr. This offensive line is very young. They're inexperienced. They replaced their top 6 linemen from a year ago when it came to snap counts and experience. So that's an area that we can improve on. Someone has to step up this week with Anthony Lucas and Eric Gentry out, right? So who's that player going to be? Is it going to be a young guy? Is it going to be someone that's already shown some flashes this year? And then the final thing is, just because I am over-preparing and I always look at everything just to put it out there,
Love it.
They have shown some Wildcat packages with their backup quarterback. His name is MJ Moore, so we have to be ready for that. Now, I know Danton Lynn has watched the film, but if you go back and watch the Villanova game, they will use some Wildcat where he comes in with some run packages like they did with Prabula a week ago, like they did with Tyler Warren. So that's another thing. But overall, I just want to see a defense come out there, fly around, get some takeaways. Let's get some turnovers this week like we did last week, create some spark plays on offense, and quiet this Maryland crowd.
Now, I don't know if it's because I end up hearing what you say each preview probably like 4 times by the time I'm done listening in person and the edit, but in games this season in particular, I just hear your voice going, now they do use X, Y, and Z, and then suddenly I'm seeing it on the field. Like the things that you've mentioned offhand have shown up multiple times against USC. Is that just that we're bringing out all the stops for USC type of thing, or is that just you being a nerd?
Well, I think it's 2 parts. Me watching too much film.
Sure.
But that's what you do as a coach. But the thing is when you prepare for a team from an offensive standpoint, when you're preparing for a defense, right? So I'm putting my mind in Maryland's offensive coordinator right now going into this week. You watch things that they do well, right? But then you watch things you struggle with, right? And that's why I mention it, because we struggled with some of those Wildcat plays last week with Warren, with Pribula. We've struggled with, pre-snap motion. That's why I said they don't do a ton of it as much as Minnesota does or Penn State does. But since we've struggled with it, well, we see more this week, right? Coaches take advantage of that. Same thing with us on defense.
Sure.
When we watch opposing teams, they struggle at left tackle. Let's bring more pressure to that side. They struggle with these different looks. Let's show them, more zone than man because they struggle with it. So you're always trying to find that advantage. That's why maybe it's not a staple on their offense of pre-snap motion, of doing Wildcat plays, but it's something that we have struggled with before, so I just have to mention it.
Yeah, no.
Now, I know Lynn and his staff aren't watching this podcast, but for me, when it comes to my preparation, you would sit down and say, okay, this is what they do 80% of the time. This is what they do 60% of the time. This is the small 10 to 5% that we've struggled with, so I have to put it out there. I guarantee you it's not a huge portion of practice, but they are practicing some Wildcat plays. This week, when we go against scout team on defense, we are practicing some of those pre-snap motions, maybe more so than what they're doing, just in preparation of them watching our film and trying to take advantage of some of that stuff.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I just love the player mindset aspect you take to this podcast.
I wouldn't be able to sleep tonight if I didn't mention them running Wildcat, and then they run Wildcat on Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
Someone watching at home is like, Cody didn't even mention it. We didn't know they had Wildcat.
Oh, my goodness.
Just got to be ready for that. So fans watching at home, if they have Wildcat with their backup quarterback this week, you can point out and say, hey, Cody had us ready for that.
For sure. Alrighty, let's get into Maryland's defense. Before we do, just want to give a thanks to Audi. What you expect from an SUV is a range of sizes to fit your lifestyle. Expectations matter, but exceeding them matters more. The Audi family of SUVs, progress you can feel. And Trojan fans, celebrate every USC win and enjoy the sweet taste of victory with a free donut at Ralph's the day after the win. Download your digital coupon from the Ralph's app to score your free donut at any LA area Ralph's store. Alrighty, Cody, I know you previewed the defensive coordinator for Maryland. What are their stats looking like?
I'm going to start with scoring defense. They're giving up 24 points per game, which is 74th in college football. Total defense is 364 points per game, which is 71st. Passing defense, this is where they've struggled, an area that I think we can take advantage of. Well, we said that a week ago, and then our run offense was very good, too, against one of the best run defenses in college football. But opposing teams have 258 yards per game, which is 109th in college football. Rushing defense, they have been solid in this category with 106 yards per game for opponents, which is 27th in college football. They've been solid in third down defense. Their opponents have a 36% conversion rate. Their takeaways, though, this year is where they have really excelled. This is a huge game for us, protecting the football, eliminating turnovers. We did a good job a week ago, but obviously that last interception is the one that hurt us. When it comes to interceptions, they have 8 on the year, which is 12th in the entire country. And turnovers as a whole, they have 14 on the year, which is 7th in the entire country.
Okay, now key players. Who are you looking at?
Yeah, I got a couple red dot players on this Maryland defense. The first one is linebacker Ruben Hypolite II, 6 foot, 235-pound senior. He has 26 tackles, which is a team high. He is the leader and the captain of this defense. He does it all for them on that side of the football. The other linebacker is Michael Harris, a 6 foot, 215-pound sophomore. He has 25 tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble. A very good athlete at the linebacker position, does a good job of moving sideline to sideline or laterally. Like we say here on the Victory Pod. I know I nailed it.
So proud
that was
of
first
you.
try, too. For those who don't know, I've struggled with that word in the past. Now, my second red dot player is their other linebacker, Caleb Wheatland. He's a 6'1", 227-pound junior. He has 21 tackles, one fumble recovery, but he leads the team with 3 sacks. Right? They love to send him in pressure. Our offensive line needs to know where he's at on every play. On third down, we have to find Caleb Wheaton. They like to bring him from that linebacker position and get some pressure on the quarterback. Now, my other red dot player, and in my opinion, probably their best player on this entire defense is their safety/nickel defensive back, Glendon Miller. He's a 6'2", 195-pound senior. He has 24 tackles, 1 fumble recovery, 4 interceptions, which leads the team. He is the definition of a ball hawk. He's also a very good tackler. He will play some safety. Majority of the time, though, you see him at that nickel position. He'll play some of that linebacker, too, even if we're in base or we go 2 tight end. They like to leave him on the field at all times. They do a good job in motion, too, of rotating their nickel to safety, and then they'll bring a safety to play nickel, so they like to rock and roll their safeties, but we have to know where Glendon Miller is at all times on the field. Another one of their safeties is Jalen Husky, a 6'1", 190-pound junior, 17 tackles, 3 interceptions, probably one of their better cover players in their secondary. He also had 4 interceptions a year ago, so a ball hawk, knows how to get after the football. Their next safety they're going to play is Levain Scruggs. He's a 6'2", 205-pound sophomore, 20 tackles, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, and 1 pass defense. A very good player for a younger sophomore player, plays at a high level. Now, my last red dot players are defensive lineman Jordan Phillips, 6'3", 320-pound sophomore, 11 tackles, and that's pretty much it on the stat sheet, but he's that type of player in the middle of the defense, a defensive lineman that's not going to jump off the stat sheet, right?
Yeah.
He's not going to be a Heisman finalist at the end of the year, but he's a huge staple on this defense. Another big challenge this week for Jonah Monheim. It just feels like when you play in the Big Ten, especially in the interior of this offensive line, it's just back-to-back weeks where you have to be ready. But in my opinion, Pregnon, Alani Noah's played better, but Jonah Monheim's done a very good job. But another challenge this week. And their other defensive lineman is Kayshawn Fuller, 6'3", 264-pound senior, 12 tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery.
Now, looking at this defense as a whole, what do they run scheme-wise?
Yeah, this is a 3-4 defense when they are in base, which I don't know how much we're going to see of that because we play a lot of 11 personnel or 3 wide. When I say 11, that's 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers. They do show some base defense against nickel personnel. They have before. I'll say that. They did against Indiana. They got hit for a big play against it, so I don't know how much we will see of that.
Okay.
They do that more so if they think you're going to run the football to create an advantage in the run game, which we might this week. We might be heavy run out of 11 personnel, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them use some base against that. But like I said, they've given up some big plays off of it. Be ready for them to move guys around in their secondary. Like I said, they'll move a safety to nickel. They'll move some corners around. They'll play multiple different safeties on the back end, so we have to be ready for that. They like to use a lot of different pressures with the fronts that they have, right? When they go nickel, it'll be 4 down. But like I mentioned, they will show you some 3-down looks, some odd fronts, and bring pressure off of that on 3rd down, on pressure situations, on obvious passing situations. So we've got to be ready for that. It's going to be a huge week for communicating up front with our offense line and Miller when it comes to pass protection. He is not afraid to be aggressive, like I mentioned, especially on 3rd down. We have to be ready for pressure at all times. Now, it may not be as much as we saw from Martindale against Michigan. It may not be as much a week ago against Penn State trying to get after Miller, but he does have a lot of pressure looks and a variety of different looks. 3rd down, he'll show you funky formations a little bit too. It is a little bit more similar to Lynn than it is a week ago that we saw from Penn State. So he will show you some of those overloads. He'll show you some of those double A gap with the linebacker walked up, and then he'll either get out or he'll bring pressure. So he does a good job of mixing that up. When they do bring pressure and they play aggressive, they will leave some holes in this defense. That's where I think we can take advantage of it. Now, again, when they bring pressure, they'll drop ends out, though, like we've seen in the past. And that's kind of the MO of a lot of defenses. If you bring pressure from the left, you're going to have to rotate guys over and drop out to protect that. But when they drop, just be ready for those quick throws, for them not to get tip throws or not to get some hands on the football and get some interceptions. But when they do bring pressure, they struggle to cover a little bit more on the back end, so that's where we can take advantage. They do a good job of mixing up coverages in the back end. You'll see a good amount of man. You'll see a good amount of zone. They like to keep you guessing as a quarterback so you can't get into a rhythm. You can't get comfortable. You'll see a variety of coverages off of that, too. It's not just going to be cover 1 man. You'll see 2 man. You'll see man with a hole defender, which means there's a guy that's spying the quarterback but also playing in the middle of the field reading your eyes. When they play zone, they'll play cover 6. They'll play quarters, like I mentioned. They'll also play some one high and bring a safety down. So just be ready for a variety of coverages. And the biggest thing with this defense, their MO is they like to play everyone tight to the line of scrimmage. They like to be, like I said, aggressive. They like to come down and let their safeties make some big tackles. That is something I think we can take advantage of if they want to play that tight to the line of scrimmage. If we can protect, right, they're going to bring some linebacker pressure, but if we can protect, this is a week where we can let the football rip, like I've talked about with Miller, pushing the ball down the field and taking some shots over the top.
Well, given what you just described about the pressure that they bring, and both you and Coach Riley have mentioned how, this offensive line took a step forward against Penn State, what are your expectations for this offensive line against Maryland?
Yeah, we have to continue to take that step, right? You can't take one step forward and two back.
Sure.
You have to continue to improve. And it's easy to say, right? But the biggest thing for me is we're going up against a decent pass rush, right? They have 12 sacks on the year, so they're not jumping off the stat sheet, but they also do a good job of getting some pressure on the quarterback. A big reason for their pass rush getting home is because, like I said, the variety of pressures that they'll bring, the different looks, that they'll go 3 down odd, they'll go 4 down, they'll do overload on 3rd down, they'll walk guys up, and then they'll drop them out and go drop 8 and only bring 3, but then they'll bring 5 or 6 or even 7 sometimes and go cover 0. So we have to be ready for all of that. But the biggest thing for me this week is communication, but also getting the snap count. We cannot be late. That's something that's hurt us in the past with Elijah Page, with Mason Murphy. How many times against Michigan or Minnesota, doing with the clap or maybe looking at the football, trying to see both. Are we late getting off the football? And now you've already lost. You don't have a chance to win in your one-on-ones. I do expect to see some more chip blocking. I think that was great. It worked to our advantage. I know there's an argument if you lose a player in the pass route, but they're still going to get out in the flat. We had times where Kate Eldridge would chip and then get to the flat route. We had times Woody Marks would chip and then run over the football and still get a check down. So they are viable options in the pass game, but I do expect to see some more chip blocking this week. But overall, continue to win our one-on-ones, right? I think the interior of this offensive line is taking huge step forwards. I think our tackles are too, but that's where I'm going to be watching the most is how well Murphy and Page continue to develop and they can win their one-on-one blocks.
Now, something that doesn't fully match up in my mind is the fact that they're 109th in passing defense, but they're 12th in interceptions. Does that just point to a boomer bust mentality in that sense?
Yeah, it's that high risk, high reward. In the secondary, they do a good job of being ball hawks on the back end. They get their hands on the football. They do a good job in pass breakups. But when they go for some of those, they're susceptible to giving up the big plays, right? And like I said, although they do have a lot of interceptions, they are struggling to cover, especially against Northwestern a week ago, those explosive plays in the pass game. That's why they're 109th in all of college football. They give up multiple, especially early on in that football game, explosive plays through the air against Northwestern in both man and zone. Right? There was a time they played quarters at the beginning of the game, and the safety comes down off a play action, or there's 2 routes on that side. You have an in route by the tight end, which the safety responsible for, and on the outside they're playing quarters. They leave, there's no help over the middle, and you have a one-on-one shot to the post outside, gets behind the defender. That's somewhere too for me that we need to take advantage of this week. As good as their safeties are, which I think their safeties are the best part of their defense, I think that group or that unit is the best. Their corners are young. They have freshmen. They have sophomores playing out there. They struggle to cover in man-to-man. And that showed up not only against Northwestern, but it showed up against Indiana, right? They give up some of those big-time plays. Michigan State, another team that took advantage of these players on the outside. So that's something for me we have to be able to attack this week is, like I said, put it over the top. Let Deuce Robinson go up and get it. You don't have to be perfect on a back shoulder. Let Jacoby Lane run behind, or run under it and go down the field. Let Zachariah Branch, who's not the biggest guy in the world, who maybe struggles with being physical and getting that back shoulder, let him run by somebody and go down and get the football at the back of the end zone. But Miller has to make it a huge point of emphasis, and something that I've given him a little bit of a hard time on this week is his accuracy. If you are off a little bit with accuracy this week, they'll make you pay. They have safeties back there that have hands like receivers. They can go get the football. They can make some of those big plays. Glendon Miller made an amazing diving catch against Indiana on a crossing route. Like he has the body control of a receiver. That's why he has 4 interceptions already this year. He does a good job of going and getting the football in the air. But a big thing for Miller is timing, decision-making, but the most important one for me is accuracy this week. Know where to go with the football, and when you do go with it, you've got to be pinpoint and make sure, and let some of our guys go get it too. If it's a 50-50 ball, I'm fine with that. But if you're throwing across the middle, if you're throwing a comeback, your timing and your pinpoint accuracy has to be perfect this week, or else I'll get a hand on the football.
Now, I know you've advocated for Miller to let it rip, trust his receivers, and obviously you should do that. But if, from my perspective, I was a quarterback coming into this game, given Maryland's ball hawk tendencies, I would lean into that perfectionism almost.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me, and this is something that I struggled with, right, as a quarterback, being a perfectionist, but when it comes to accuracy, there's a difference between, aiming it and trying to make the perfect throw and just having perfect accuracy, right? Those are two different things, because when you start trying to aim it and be perfect and put it in the perfect spot, you start overthinking, right? And then you try to guide the football and you're not letting it rip. And that's what I mean when I tell Miller to let it rip. When you have perfect accuracy, or when you're on in the zone and your accuracy, you're not missing. You see those games where guys go 15 straight completions, or they're 85% completion percentage, or Miller against Louisville, where it just felt like he couldn't miss.
Yeah.
It's because you're trusting your mechanics. You're trusting all the reps that you had in the offseason, right? I've made this same slant throw 1,000 times. So it's just going to be muscle memory. I'm going to stand back there, put my foot in the ground, have great mechanics, and let it rip. I'm not going to think about, okay, I hope I put my foot in the ground right. I hope my mechanics are good. I hope I aim it perfectly and hit him on the perfect shoulder, perfect timing, all of that. That's when you start thinking too much. And I think Miller, and again, I don't want to speak for him, but I feel like at times with his accuracy, what he struggled with is trying to be too perfect on some of those throws, or he tries to make the perfect decision when he has two options on it, right? And I talked about it on the recap episode, is he has a go ball. He has Mekhi Lemon, who has a step on a defender. He has Jacoby Lane or Zachariah Branch, who's not the biggest body type at receiver, who gets a step on the defender, but he tries to throw a back shoulder too many times, in my opinion, or at least in this Penn State game, he's trying to put himself into a box. When you throw a back shoulder, it is a 1-by-1 window. You have to put it perfectly with the right amount of pace to fit it in that spot. When they have a go ball and they get a step on the defender, when you throw a deep shot, when you put some air under it, you give yourself a little bit more space for air. You let the receiver make you right. You can throw a go route with, we call it a 3 ball. There's a 1 on the line, 2's a medium, and 3's with some air on it. They can run under it and go up and get it. We have Deuce Robinson. We have Jacoby Lane that can go up and catch some of those 50-50 throws. When you throw a back shoulder and it's short or you're off by a little bit, it's so tough as a receiver to have that body control. And then the last thing I'll talk about, which is an exact example of this, is that last slant throw. It just felt like, for me, the one he threw an interception on when we were going down to win the game, it felt like, for me, I guarantee you Miller has thrown a slant to the left side to Deuce Robinson or to anyone, any receiver, over probably 10,000 times in his life. Whether it's at practice, whether it's in games, but sometimes in those moments when you try to be too perfect or you try to have perfect accuracy instead of just trusting yourself and letting it rip, that's when the mechanics get off a little bit. You can see on that throw, he falls off a little bit, and when your left shoulder goes high, what happens with the football? It sails as well, right? So that's something for me that I think he can take that next step, but it's tough. I was the same way. I tried to be perfect too many times in some of those big games or some of those big moments, and when that happens, it hurts you more than it can help you instead of going out there and trusting your preparation, trusting everything you've done and letting it rip.
And to your point, that touchdown to Jacoby against LSU was a free play. So it kind of takes you out of your mind in that sense.
I mean, it just, you're kind of carefree. Like, if I throw a pick on this one, it's fine because it's coming back anyways, or if I miss him, I already get free 5 yards. That's a great point. It just, when you play free and you don't put that pressure on yourself, and it's a lot easier said than done, but and that's why I always say let it rip. That's what coaches mean. Go out there and just let it rip. Like, obviously play within the offense, trust your reads, make sure you go through the entire progression and do everything right. But when it comes to throwing it, there's a reason you're the starting quarterback at USC, right? Go out there, have fun with it, let it rip, and let the guys around you do what they do best and make plays on the football.
Now, you mentioned funky looks. Where does that come into play?
Yeah, they do have some exotic looks, especially on third down. Now, I wouldn't quite put them in the Lynn or Wink Martindale category. If we're A tier, they're right below.
The funk
probably
level?
Funk level. There you go. But they do a good job of mixing up some of those looks. They do a good job of showing all out pressure, getting you to change your protection, and then they drop out, right? Then they'll only bring 3 and drop 8. They do have a green dog pressure or a add-on pressure is what it's called. I know you're looking at me like, please explain that.
Yes.
Places I've been before called it green dog. I guess the best way to explain it, we'll call it add-on. So that means when they have their linebackers in man-to-man coverage, say the Sam linebacker is man-to-man on the running back, right? But the Mike linebacker pressures and the running back goes and blocks the Mike because that's his responsibility in pass protection. Now the Sam linebacker who had man-to-man on the running back can add on and pressure because he knows the running back's not getting out, right? My responsibility in coverage is now done because the running back blocks, or if he chip blocks, or if he does anything and blocks and stays in, and the linebacker that's man-to-man on the back sees that, will add on. And that's tough sometimes as a lineman if you look and say, okay, the Sam's not coming, but then he adds on because he sees the running back who's his responsibility in man coverage block. You may not bump back off of that. He may come late. It's like a delayed pressure once he knows his man responsibility is not there, so be ready for that. They do that a good amount on third down when they go man-to-man. But overall, just a huge week for communication, right? They're not going to get as crazy. They will show double A gap. They will show overloads. They will show some stunts where they'll bring 2 guys to this side and then wrap someone back around or loop them around like we've seen before and like Michigan did and like some other opponents have done before. Not quite to that level, but again, they're going to watch what we've struggled against, so I wouldn't be surprised if they added that into their defense this week. But if we communicate well, if we get off the football with our tackles on the right time, and everyone's on the same page, we should do a good job of picking that up.
It's crazy, my football trust in you, Cody, because you can say the phrase green dog, and I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. You could make something up and I'd be like, totally, fire hydrant. I don't know.
Well, sometimes I get so in the zone when I'm talking that I just go back to talking to an offensive coordinator when I was playing, or talking to my teammates saying, hey, or in the backfield with Buck, I say, hey, Buck, be ready for green dog this week. Or telling our guard, hey, when Buck blocks, be ready for a green dog coming this week. So
always ready for a green dog.
Add on is, I guess, another way you can say it too, which is the exact definition of it. It's literally a Sam linebacker has man-to-man, on the back. My responsibility's gone. Now I'm going to add on into the pressure.
Now, when it comes to Maryland's defense against Northwestern, is there anything that stood out to you in that front?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing they did well, and again, Northwestern had less than 300 yards total in the entire game, both running and passing. So for combined offense, they weren't putting up a ton of yards. They did have some explosive plays. That's what helped them. They had some chunk plays at the right times that they finished in the end zone, but their defense did a great job of scoring some points on that side of the ball and putting them in great positions to where they didn't have to have these long drives. But some of those explosive plays were from the quarterback too. Northwestern did a good job of using their quarterback on the ground, letting them take off and run when the play broke down, especially when they show you those looks where they'll bring different guys or get out or they'll play man-to-man on the back end and have those green dog or the add-on. They'll lose the quarterback at times. So Northwestern's quarterback did a good job of that. Big week for Miller to do that. I'd love to see Miller, and he showed it a little bit last week against Penn State, of creating on the run, right, making some of those throws on third down, moving in the pocket, stepping up, moving around different ways. Against Wisconsin, great job pulling the football. Let's get down. Let's protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Once we get the first down, let's slide. But this is another big week for Miller to read some of those zone reads, and if the end crashes down, to pull and run. If it's 3rd and 4 and they're playing two-man, say the 1, 2, 3, 4 progression is done. The 5th progression, you're always told as a quarterback in two-man, is you. Take off and run. No one has responsibility on the quarterback in two-man, especially with two safeties high. No one else can sit in that area. So a big week this week for Miller. If it's 3rd and down, or if it's 3rd down, 3rd and medium, 3rd and long, and they're playing man and you have a lane and no one's open, take off and get it. You've got to be able to extend some drives with your feet. That's something that I'm sure Coach Riley and the staff have challenged him to do, but that's an area this week that Northwestern did well to keep them on the field and extend some of those drives and put up some points.
Alrighty, Cody, any other thoughts about Maryland's defense?
No, the final one for me is not necessarily what they do defensively, but for us as an offense. And like I said, they've struggled in their pass defense. They've excelled more in the run defense. But for us, I'd love for us to have a great passing attack, but I want to see us, if the run game's working, let's stick with it this week, right? We've talked about continue to get Woody Marks his touches. I still think he's the MVP of this football team, but Quentin Joyner is a close second right now with a far significant less amount of touches, right? He's making those big plays when he has the ball in his hands. I know he had a fumble against Minnesota at a crucial time when we're driving the football, but what a way to bounce back a week ago, right? He only had 5 touches for 95 yards. 2 of those were for touchdowns. I just think we need to continue to get him the football. So I say all this to say I would love for us to, although they're good at it and only giving up 106 yards per game on the ground, attack the run game, because that's something we've excelled in the last 2 weeks. Keep building that confidence with our offensive line. Allow us to run the football at will. If it's working, don't get away from it. And what I mean by getting Quentin Joyner more touches, I'm okay if that takes away from some of the pass game. Right? I don't want to take touches out of Woody's hands.
Yeah.
But to get Quentin the ball more, a minimum, in my opinion, of 10 touches on the ground for Quentin. Right? Let's get 20 to Woody and 10 for Quentin, but those can take away from the pass game. I'm okay with that. Now, if we're letting it rip and Miller's playing great and we're protecting well and we're throwing the ball over the field, keep with it, right? But you've got to stick with what's working. In my opinion, the run game has been very dominant the last 2 weeks. I'd like to see that be the case this week as well.
Alrighty, let's look at the game as a whole, Cody. It's time for the USC Man School of Pharmacy prescription to win. The keys to the game for USC against Maryland. First up, be great in pass defense this week.
Yeah, we gave up 400 yards passing to Penn State a week ago. We have to make those corrections this week and be great in pass defense. Maryland has one of the best wide receivers in college football in Ty Felton. We have to know where he is at all times and cannot let him control the outcome of this game. This Maryland offense wants to throw the football. They have over 300 yards passing per game, so we need to be great with our coverage and communication in the secondary all game long.
Now, the second key to the game, continue to get the ground game going on offense.
Yeah, we need to get the ball to Woody Marks early and often this game. I would also love for us to get Quentin Joyner some more touches this week. We need to continue to build confidence with our offensive line, and the best way to do that is to have a solid run game, especially on the road.
And the final key to the game is a simple one from you, Cody. It's just one word: finish.
Yeah, it's time to put it all together this week. I would love for us to pull away and have a commanding lead in this football game, but if it comes down to the end and it's a final possession, we need to be able to find a way to win. It's time to learn from some of those close games that we've had this year and take that next step and show that we know how to get the job done.
Alrighty, let's get into questions. Before we do, just want to give a thanks to Audi. Focus matters. Listen closely. The Audi Q8 e-tron's cabin is serenely quiet, so you can focus on other things like having tomorrow's technology today. The new fully electric Audi Q8 e-tron, how we get there matters. And at Rouse, everyone wins when it comes to saving big, because when you order online through the Rouse app, you get the same great prices, deals, and rewards on pickup or delivery that you do in store. So no matter how you shop, you always save big at Rouse. Rouse, fresh for everyone. Cody Kessler.
Fight on.
Rigo said, should our offensive playbook going forward be a run-first, run-heavy offense? It's the one part of our offense that has been consistently effective, yet we don't seem to be taking advantage of it.
I'll say this, Rigo, if you would have asked me that a couple of years ago, or maybe even earlier this season in a Lincoln Riley offense, if we're going to be run first, my answer would have probably been immediately no and not even expanded on it. But that's a great point. That's a great case, too. I really feel like we are more dominant in the ground game, especially the last couple of weeks. And when you have a hot hand with Woody Marks, when you have Quentin Joyner that's starting to show some flashes, when the offensive line has been very dominant in the run game, you keep going with that, right? And I feel like we did a good job on Saturday against Penn State of keeping up with the run game. I think in the second half we had 16 pass attempts and 10 run attempts for our plays. So we did a good job of being balanced, more so than we've seen from Lincoln Riley in the past with this air raid offense. But yeah, I think if we're rolling on offense on Saturday in the run game, we keep with it. Like I said, get Woody Marks going and get Quentin Joyner some more touches on Saturday.
No Cheese says, Cody, do you think Coach Riley should switch up some of the looks and run some pistol sets?
I'm not opposed to pistol. The reason you do pistol as a spread offense, as a shotgun offense, a team that doesn't get under center, is to mimic a little bit of under center. It also gives your running back a two-way go when it comes to a defense lining up, when it comes to a defense knowing which way they're going. When you have a running back on your left and shotgun, majority of the time they're going to go to the right, so you can run that mesh. When they're on the right, they're going to run to the left so you can read that defensive end. I wouldn't mind some pistol looks, especially since we don't get under center. That'll put their linebackers in a little bit of a bind. It'll be something that they haven't seen before a whole lot with Lincoln Riley doing. So I wouldn't mind that, and then you get some play action off of it as well. So, yeah, I mean, are we going to do it? Who knows? But if Coach Riley puts it in, I think it can be advantageous for us this week.
We got a question, and we mentioned this at the top from Jonathan, who said, with Gentry and Lucas's injuries, who can we expect to step up in their places?
Yeah, this is going to be some of these freshmen are going to have to step up. I think Desmond Stevens is a guy that can step up at linebacker. He had that big interception a week ago. Cameron Fountain, another guy that I think can step up in that position. Guys that are starting to play well. Abasiri, I know he's a little bit more of an interior guy, but when you lose a pass rusher in Lucas, when you lose anybody on the defensive line, you've got to look to some of those younger guys. Jameel Muhammad, another guy who plays a good amount, but it's time for him to take that next step. Braylon Shelby was my breakout player of the year in the preseason. He's shown some flashes of it. It's time for him, in my opinion, to really be that dominant pass rushing threat. And now he's going to be a guy that's going to be that primary pass rusher on that side. He's not going to have to rotate reps with Anthony Lucas anymore. So, yeah, I think there's multiple guys that can step up in that position. But whoever it is, whoever starts playing well, whoever takes over as that premier pass rusher when Lucas is out, needs to do it quick because there's you got a big game coming up this week, and we got some tough games ahead. You've got to be able to fill that role and be dominant on Saturday and moving forward.
It's interesting, too, because Riley mentioned true freshmen getting some time, too, potentially Cam Fountain and Lorenzo Cowan. So
yeah, Cowan, another guy.
Names to watch
Good point.
for.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just next man up mentality, especially when you're a younger player. You never know when that time's coming.
We got a question from Chadster who said, do you think there's an issue with the coaching, or have we just played tough opponents?
No, I absolutely think it's tough opponents. And if you really watch the film, right, and I know there's a lot of frustration from the fans. I know there's a lot of comments. We read the comments. I understand that. There's a lot of people who think the sky is falling and it's the end of the world. We're 3-3. I get that. I get the point of football is to win the game, right? We're not over here handing out participation awards. I understand that. And the coaching staff is feeling the same way. But you have to be able to take positives even after a loss. You can't let those, the final score overshadow the progress that we've made. I really believe that we are on the right track right now. Think about it, too, as a whole. Miller Moss, first year ever playing quarterback, right? Jonah Monheim, first year ever playing center. And I'm looking from an offensive perspective.
Yeah.
Young tackles. Elijah Page only has 6 starts, I think, under his belt now at this point in his career. 7 starts. You have guys that are moving around. You have Alani Noah, who's rotated reps. Now he's starting. You have a wide receiver core who doesn't have a true wide receiver one that's played a lot of football. Now you can argue Kyron Hudson is that guy, and he is, but you have other playmakers that have never stepped up or played the amount of time that they have, right? So you're having so many different guys on the offensive side of the football having to play a key part on this offense or make a big impact that haven't been there before. They're going to learn from this. They're going to get better. They're going to continue to improve. Yeah. You look at the defensive side of the ball. This is a whole new staff on defense. It's a new defensive coordinator. These aren't excuses. These are just truths, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
Can we be better? Should we learn how to win these football games when they're close like that? Do you want to see that improvement, especially after the third loss of being able to pull it out at the end? Absolutely, but these are all learning moments. These are all teaching moments. These are all opportunities for this team to learn from it and get better, and I absolutely believe these tough times right now, or these losses or these adversity, are going to help us so much in the future and help this team get to that next step.
I know you could argue chicken or the egg, but I do think it's significant that this is such a young roster, and they've been put in how many last-minute gotta win moments in this season so far against top teams.
And just quickly before we move on, just go back to the first game though, right? Before the LSU game, what were your expectations, right? Obviously you're always positive and you're optimistic, but you didn't know. And the biggest question mark was in our podcast before the season, a lot of new faces, a lot of young players. Then we beat LSU, a good football team that's proving to be a good football team. Our expectations go through the roof. Then we beat Utah State blowout, right? Then it's a shutout win. You feel a lot better. Then we struggle a little bit against Michigan, but played well. You start to even out, and you don't really know. So if you go back to the beginning, you would really feel that, okay, we had no idea what this team was going to look like. No big expectations. Was college football playoff even an option? Who knew? But then we win one, we win a couple. You kind of get blinded by that. But when reality sets back in, this is still a very good football team. Coach Riley is a very good football coach. Denton Lynn is a very good football coach. We have a great staff around both of those guys who are our play callers. It is just a young football team, and it's going to take some of these lessons and the inexperience that we have to learn from this, to take that next step and be better and be as dominant as we want to be, which I think we're absolutely on the right track.
It's so funny because Trojan Mom, a.k.a. your mom, basically said exactly what you just said. And I believe Joel Klatt also said that as well on his podcast. He's been saying essentially what we've been saying on this podcast as well, that this team is young but putting it together and putting the steps to be better down the road, whether it's this season or beyond.
100%. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Joel Klatt. I haven't listened to that one. I'll go listen to it. But that's what I think is the key message is, I know it's not quite the NFL where they say, okay, we're rebuilding, right? It's tough to rebuild in college. Now with the transfer portal, it's a lot easier, I guess, to quote unquote have a rebuild because you can go get players in positions that can play right away that are experienced. But overall, it's just getting those reps in. It's building a team up that lost a lot of key players from a year ago, that lost their Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, that lost multiple offensive linemen, that lost their key players on the outside of wide receiver for the last 2 years under Riley, and letting these younger guys get into the spotlight. That, hopefully you can retain them. Obviously, I know I'm not blind to the fact there is transfer portal. Are we going to have the same roster next year that we had this year for the younger guys that are they all going to stay? No, I understand that. And that's everywhere in the country. But you have to be able to, as much as you can as a coach, recruit to retain these players, to keep the core group here. And that's something that Penn State had a week ago when I went through their roster and went through the film breakdown. They had a lot of core players that had been at Penn State for a couple of years. So that's very important going forward. We have to be able to do that in the offseason. But overall, when you do go to the transfer portal and you find some of these new faces, they've got to come in and play right away, but they've got to fit in with the youth or with the core group and the core values that this team has. But like I said, I think there's a lot of positives. I know we're 3-3. I know the goal at the end of the day is to win games. We're not giving out participation awards. We're not, high-fiving after a loss. Everyone's frustrated. We're mad. I'm mad. Keely's mad. It's tough because we love, USC football. But again, there are a lot of positives, even though we are 3-3, that I think are going to help us so much going forward.
Steven said, we did a good job in finishing off LSU in the first game of the season, but the last couple games that has seemed to change. Is there anything that can be done to restore that mindset, or is it just an issue of adjusting to Big Ten style?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, it was interesting that Riley also talked about it on Trojans Live, because he said, we're an interesting team because we have been there this season and have done it before, but then we go back to not being able to do it. So it's an interesting give and take there.
Yeah, I think that the biggest part too, and I almost kind of talked to Coach Riley about this more, but it's tough to pinpoint these because every game's different.
Yeah.
Every scenario is different. Every momentum shift in those games is different. Every outcome or every final drive or who has the ball, is the offense, the defense have the ball, is different. So it's tough to really pinpoint what it is. But I think the biggest thing for me taking the X's and O's out of it is just experience, like I just said. But also, guys, you always hear the saying, act like you've been there before. Perform like you've been there before. We now have, but before that, we really hadn't, right? The LSU game, like I said, I think blinded people to a lot of the issues or areas of concern that this team had, but we felt so great after the win that we were like, okay, we've got a great football team. We've got a national championship or bust, right? But that's not the reality of it. It's still, like I said, a young football team that has been in that situation for the first time together, and they won. So now you feel like they should do it every time, which they should, in my opinion. We should be able to do that. But you're playing other good football teams, too, that have been in that position. You're playing a Penn State team that's number 4 in the country that knows how to win those games as well, that has been in those situations under Franklin. Drew Aller has been there before. Abdul Carter has been there before. Their core group, Tyler Warren, has been there before. We are still learning how to win those football games. Again, this is not the question portion where I'm just making excuse after excuse. I promise you, as a former player, no one gets more frustrated than the alum, than the former players when we lose games like that. It's very tough to go back and know that we were, missing this player, missing that block, or missing this, or we didn't do this well enough to win the game. As a player, to eat you alive. I didn't even sleep on Saturday night after the game because I felt like I was in that game. That's how emotionally draining it is. But overall, there are a lot of positives and things that we can take from this football team that I absolutely believe they're going to learn from and make some of those decisions going forward that's going to help them in the long run and learn from it and obviously, figure out a way to get it done.
If you remember, I talked to a fan on the Sunday podcast who said, basically, I'll see you next year. His name is Turtle. That's his username. And I talked about how I'm an Angels fan, so I get it. Like, he said, Keely, I'm also a diehard Angels fan.
Oh,
so,
boy.
yes, we're in the struggle. He said, I've learned to lower my expectations over the years. With that being said, I feel like we just need to have lower expectations, even though it's year 3, ?
Yeah, I think that's always obviously the tough part is expectations, especially in preseason. We talk about so much that it doesn't matter if you're USC or if you're the reigning national championship or you're the 131st team in college football that has won maybe 1 or 2 games the last 3 years. There's always that optimism. There's always that expectation. There's always that hope of this is our year. We can do it. National championship or bust. All these positives, and you want to have that, right? Because when you don't have expectations, you don't have optimism, then obviously you're not in the right place as a program. For us, when we have those expectations, even though are they a reality yet? Maybe not. Maybe we're getting closer to that. When are we going to get there? I know that's the question a lot of fans ask. It being Coach Riley's 3rd year. You've talked about before, though, he still has a turnover from previous regimes, from being able to recruit the way he wants to recruit and we're getting good recruits right now. We can't talk specifics about them, but we are getting very high recruits right now because they see the vision that Coach Riley has. They see the type of program that USC have that's all positive. But for me, when it goes back to the original question, I think it's important to take out expectations, I guess, on a yearly basis and just make them more on a week-to-week basis. Now, you may think, okay, well, we lose 2 in a row. My expectations are going to keep going lower. But you've got to look at the film. You've got to look as a whole, as a football team, of learning from those games. If last week we struggled at running the football, this week let's be better at running the football. That's what I mean in those expectations. That last week, if we struggled at throwing the ball over the field, this week I want to see improvements in those areas. We've talked about the offensive line, struggled in pass protection. Your expectations may be, okay, well, they've got to get better. I expect them to get better when they're coached the right way, when they have film to learn from. We are doing that, right? Then your expectations go up a little bit instead of being as a whole, national championship or bust, and now we lose 3 games, and now it's like, okay, there's nothing else to play for. From the outside looking in, sure, I get that. You want to win national championships, but from a team standpoint, a developmental, am I saying that right?
Developmental. I didn't say it right.
Is this my new word of the week? Developmental standpoint, you have to look on a week-to-week basis if guys are taking the right step forward and showing improvements.
Now, Joe Osorio, Mr. Ashcraft, and Zach all asked questions about the travel. This will be the longest distance USC will go to play in the regular season to Maryland. And I just want to comment on something because I know Riley said on Trojans Live that because I feel like the context was kind of missing on the internet, as it usually is. But he said because we're leaving, it's a longer trip, we're going to leave later than we did in previous trips this season. Now, I want to give context as someone who has been on those trips this season in my last 3 years here. When he says later, to give you an idea, I was sitting in my seat on the plane at 5 a.m. like 3 weeks ago. Later means like 11 a.m. It's not like we're leaving at 7 p.m. So
Gotcha.
So the thought process from what I am putting together, because I haven't talked to Riley about this specifically, is that you go through your walkthroughs here at USC, you do all the things you normally do on a Friday, and then get on the plane, go on that long flight, and then just go back to your hotel, do the nutrition, do all that things, and go to bed. Rather than sitting on, everyone knows if you make a cross-country flight, you're not like roaring to go off the plane. So I think the thought process is do all the mentally taxing things you need to do to prep for the game here in your home, and then go on the flight.
Yeah, and that was going to be my argument is, when we played Notre Dame, now we didn't do it every week, so that makes it a lot more difficult, or every other week, in the Big Ten. But we would leave on Thursdays, and you feel like, okay, that's a great idea. You get adjusted to the time, you get to sleep better, but it also messes up your routine at home, right?
Yeah.
It messes up, and that's kind of your point of, okay, you can argue leaving on Thursday, especially when we lose 3 hours, instead of our Midwest or East Coast opponents gaining 2 hours or gaining 3 hours, can help a little bit, which it can, I think, when it comes to getting your legs back under you with travel and all that, but you have to sacrifice something with that. And that's your Thursday practice is shortened. You don't do, you don't get to do as much on red zone. You don't get to do as much on meetings on that day. Now you're trying to put, travel into that. And now the next day you're off because now your Friday meeting would normally be in the facilities and your normal routine is now in a hotel. And now you're trying to figure out your walkthrough is in a conference room. Yeah. So it's a lot more. So there are sacrifices with that. But again, obviously Coach Riley and the staff, it's year 1 of the Big Ten. They're going to find a perfect formula for that. They're going to figure out or try new things to figure out what works best for this football team and apply that going forward.
Now, what's not ideal is Zach said, what do you think the effects of the travel will be? I know it will be harsh considering USC's returning to a short week and a Friday game against Rutgers. That, to me, is the scheduling nightmare.
Who knows what time you guys are going to get. Well, luckily, it's a 1 p.m. kick, right?
Here.
So West Coast, 1 p.m.,
Yes.
4 o'clock, your guys are over.
And I'm not going to say anything because last time I jinxed myself, And I got back way later than I thought.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be a tough week. But the good thing is, talking about experiences football team, we've done that before. We played Utah State on a short week after a Sunday game. So we have experience from that. Now, Vegas is a little bit closer than Maryland, than College Park. So that'll be different, but that's another challenge. It's something to learn from, and that's something that's probably going to be a factor going forward. So you've got to learn this year, even if it isn't done perfectly or you don't know exactly the recipe of having, to do a short week after coming from the East Coast because you haven't done it before. But there's things that we can learn from that and apply going forward, and something that's going to help us for years to come.
Final question goes to Nainoa. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he's giving you an opportunity to complain about your biggest complaint, Cody.
Uh-oh.
He says, how does Cody watch his film? Does he have access to the All-22, or does he just watch the TV replay? Take it away, Cody.
Well, luckily, I'm not going to shout him out because I don't want them to get copyrighted again. But I have found some new YouTubers that post the full game, or some posts, sometimes like Fox or ABC or ESPN, they will post, just 10-minute highlights. Obviously, they're not going to post the whole game. But there are some YouTubers out there. I don't want to say their name because I don't want to get them in trouble and lose my source. Like we RIP Matthew Loves Ball. He does actually, though, have a new name.
Oh, does he?
I found him. I'm not the same logo and everything.
That's incredible.
It's just got a number 2 next to it. Different name, but I'm not going to call it out there. So I don't want anybody, all the internet people on there going after him. But yeah, I do not have all 22. That's my argument, is that.
That's your biggest gripe.
I hate it. I hate it so much. I want to watch it from, the side view, from behind, from the front view, from all the different angles that you get in the all 22 like I was when I played. But now I have to watch it from, hopefully someone records and puts the entire game. Now our games, my wife records, but still, it's tough watching a TV copy and not being able to rewind or using the remote to rewind instead of having the clicker and being able to, go to the back view, go to the side view, watch different things.
Your view is dictated in that sense. You don't get to see the whole play develop.
But I take that as a challenge. I take a lot of pride in my preparation and watching film and film study over the years. So now I'm like, all right, I'm nerfed a little bit on this. Instead of getting to watch the all-22 version, now I have to get the TV copy, but I still find a way to hopefully get it done and give you guys good content.
Okay, Cody, stop us if you've heard this before, listeners. Oh, okay.
Where are you going?
Well, we got to go to practice. That's what I was about to say.
We got to do a score prediction real quick, and I know you're trying to skip it, but I got mine, even if you don't want to do one.
Okay.
I am going 38-17 USC.
Okay, that's a great score prediction. I'm not doing one.
Cool. Everyone at home,
I protest.
Give us score predictions in the comments, then I'll have a competition against our listeners.
At least tell Cody that you made it this far.
Yeah, no, exactly. But we do have to go to practice. I got to interview Coach Hansen. You've got multiple things to do. Emily, you're amazing. Crash tube on camera. Everyone's done a great job today.
Shouts to Emily.
It is crazy the week that we all have and getting these episodes in. So I hope you guys enjoy them. Love you guys. Fight on. Let's get back in the win column this week. Go handle business in Maryland, and then get ready for a short week coming up the following week. So fight on. I'm out, and hopefully we'll see you guys Sunday with a positive recap episode.
And it will be a quick turnaround for the next preview episode. So lots of content coming your way. So thanks for listening and staying along with us. We appreciate everyone who hasn't given up and still watches these previews. We appreciate you. But that's going to wrap it up. That's Cody. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all next time.